we'll get started this morning. Just double check those mics, and it should be pretty quick. You guys all know it's pretty quiet out there right now, relatively quiet compared to some years. So we're going to go, and Jim, my Mac updated overnight. So if something looks weird, just let me know. Teams is different for me this morning. But we'll go through our normal cadence here, a trivia question, our GDU and stress degree day update. We'll talk about our disease risk map. Then we're also going to talk about some ear fill, some ear tip things that everybody's seen. Talk a little bit about soybeans as well, and then our spotlight product. So we'll get you out of here on time. So the trivia question of the day, 2 parts. How many instar stages do Western bean cutworm larvae go through? And on average, how long does that take? So, Jim, I cannot see the chat.
So far, surprisingly, it's quiet.
Okay.
Not an answer yet.
You can answer just
We've
one or
got
the
an
other.
answer with David, 6.
That is correct. 6 instar stages. Do we have any guess on how long that can actually take on average?
31 days.
There are actually some studies that I read that pinpointed it. They can be on average 55 days for the full life cycle through those instars, but anywhere from 30 to even 78 days was the longest that it took in the research I saw. So one thing I just wanted to bring that up for those of us that are seeing some Western bean cutworm and some larvae feeding on ears. The egg masses that I was getting pictures of way back on July 7th, they could potentially continue to have ear feeding all the way through August 31st. So this is a wider, could be a wider pest depending on our environmental conditions than say a rootworm that moves through in about 7 to 10 days per instar for 3. So I just wanted to call to attention that kind of difference in the length of the life cycle there, that they are a little longer. They go through a few more instars. So you're likely going to be seeing them longer than we would corn rootworm larvae damage.
Congrats, David Simonson, back-to-back winner. Well done,
Dynasty winner there. So also want to call, just like normal, we're going to give you an update on GDU accumulation. Actually got a text about this last night, and I said just wait till the DAACAT call. So with our 3 planting dates, we're looking at 411. So the guys that really got in quick, 2181. We're about 200 heat units ahead of normal, and that would be the 30-year average. Guys, just double check your mute setting. That'd be super great. So for April 22nd, we're sitting in about 2,056. We're sitting about 156 heat units ahead. So we're putting that black layer into that first week of September. Really going to be key for those of us looking for silage. I know in my territory and Jim's territory, we have some big silage acres. And then for that kind of the beginning of that last window of planting, May 5th, 1946 for Sac City, we're looking at 134 heat units ahead of average. Now, later in this presentation, I'll also highlight this tool, but I'm going to say it here. Jim does a really good job of updating us every week in the newsletter of the kind of variability we're seeing across the territory with GDUs. You guys can go back and look at, and we also link to the tool that I show here, the MRCC. It's produced by Purdue. There's a lot of variability within the territory in the planting dates of how far ahead of normal are we. So for Sac City, for that 411 planting date, we're looking at 218 heat units ahead of normal. But for a town to the south, such as Harlan, that same planting date is only 134 heat units ahead of normal. So there's some variability in the heat and weather we're seeing. We continue to talk about that in newsletters and on these DAACAT calls. That variability is probably going to be the biggest story going forward. But just double check for your own area to to look at the heat units that you're actually ahead going forward. So,
and just to add to that, these black layer dates, projected is the key word there. And I've noticed this tool is good, but I would say on black layer dates, it is tending to be towards the earlier side. I think in reality, we usually get a little bit longer ear fill. And, you look at these dates, and if you put 60 days going back at a tassel date, it's probably close. There were some of these earlier planting dates that were tasseling, say, 1st of July, 4th of July. But I think some of it is some of our newer hybrids, but we do tend to get a longer ear fill period. We add to that kernel depth over a longer period of time than what we used to. Unless we really have light soils or dry weather scenarios where we prematurely shut it down. But as long as we've got a healthy plant, as long as we've got some moisture, I would be very surprised if we would have black layer dates by the 2nd of September, even for an earlier planting date. And this is considering a 108-day hybrid, but most likely we're going to be just slightly later than that. So keep that in mind overall.
It's a good scouting date. How about that? It's a good scouting date to start double checking things.
Yep.
Jim, you want to touch on the stress degree days here?
Right. So just a reminder on stress degree days, anytime we're above 86. If we are a day when we get 90 degrees, that's 4 stress degree days. So just interesting to see where we're at with the different locations, going from clear up in the northwest corner in Lyon County. We're right at 140 this year for a 22nd of April planting date. And remember, that is the rough cutoff. Once we're 140 or higher is when we can start to see it affect yields. Obviously, though, it depends a lot on what type of moisture we have in that scenario. If we've got plenty of moisture, plenty of even humidity and things like that to take some stress off that crop, then the 140 may or may not be affecting us. But keep in mind, we're only on the 11th of August, so we've still got some stress degree days to continue to accumulate. But as compared to past years, especially 2 years ago, we are running way ahead on stress degree days. So that's something to keep in mind, and especially this time of the year, we talk a lot about setting expectations, and we're looking at what that ear fill looks like. This is a good time or a good reference to talk about on what we've gone through during this season.
So true. So we'll just give you an update of what the maps for disease development. These are the ones that we send out with the newsletter. And just a reminder that these are a risk level for disease development for environmental conditions that are conducive for the pathogen to complete its life cycle. It's not necessarily a risk factor for yield impact. So as we get later into the season, as that crop begins to mature and go through its life cycle, the likelihood of severe yield impacts continues to decrease. That's great, but we'll still see some of those risk levels show up as high because the environment is conducive for the pathogen to continue its life cycle. So we can see that 8.2 of was the last time this was run in 2026, that we're in that moderate category for southern rust. We are seeing some reports of southern rust, especially in the areas where we're catching a little bit of rains, where we're catching a little bit of fog. Some of the drier areas may be a little bit more variable, but not that different compared to what we were seeing last year. But the disease just got a foothold much earlier and was able to keep progressing. Jim, any comments?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Nora. If you look at this map, of course, a lot of you have been getting plenty of questions about this, especially southern rust. Is it a risk yet? Yeah, risk level very similar to last year, but the difference was we were seeing a lot more disease in the field at this point last year. We had a lot more spores that were starting to take off and go airborne. So obviously in a much better position, but considering the environment, we've still got that risk level. And tar spot, as you look at compared to last year, considerably less risk. Still not out of the woods left there. You talk about the growth stage, and you look at the GDUs that we were just visiting. You know, when we are at that dough stage, that's always been the question mark. You know, R4 dough stage, can we still benefit from a fungicide? I think last year we saw some benefit from an R4 application, but we were in a lot different disease environment as far as the amount that was already present and already starting to produce spores. Once we do start to see that dent, which we are in a number of fields, just getting into that early R5, then typically, we are 3 to 4 weeks away from black layer, probably getting more like 4. And then at that point, boy, if we're starting to see a dent, even with some pretty good disease pressure, it'd be very, very questionable whether we'd see any response from a fungicide application at that point.
All right. Well, Jim, why don't you talk about this one and I'll take the second corn pollination slide.
We had noted this in the newsletter, but it's a really great time of the year. Hopefully, not too disappointing, but pollination and the early ear fill, you really start to see what's going on in the field, good or bad. Some cases there's some unpleasant surprises, but also seen over the years some hybrids that tip back that really look disappointing, but still have a great opportunity to get some kernel depth. So some hybrids just naturally are going to show that 1 to 2 inch tip back. And you get 3 to 4 inch tips, that really starts to get your attention and start wondering, okay, what happened? What did it run out of? Was it just strictly a moisture thing, or was something else going on? Was it maybe too high a population for that particular hybrid? This is an example from a plot. Actually, the top hybrid there is Pioneer 13777. Then the bottom 3 years are DKC 11235 side by side. So yeah, you'd be taking the ears on the bottom, but sometimes hybrids naturally are going to show that tip and can still yield through it. So it's not automatically something that you're going to start drawing conclusions from yield on, but like I've been in a lot of 11235 lately, and then sure like how those ears are filling out at this point.
Yeah, so in this conversation, you guys send us a lot of pictures. We see a lot in the field, a lot of variability in the plots, but you guys are getting a lot of pictures as well for growers. So I wanted to give you guys some links. Obviously, you'll get this on Friday when we send this out, but some links to kind of walk through some tools and some problem solving for when the grower goes, why? Why did this happen? It can be really emotional to see a big tip on, even if genetically that's not abnormal for the hybrid. So how do we talk the grower through and remind him what this crop went through, what may be an impacting factor? So that MRCC Corn GDU tool, that link is in the newsletter every week, but you guys can put in a pin for anywhere in the Midwest, enter a planting date. We also provide the GDUs to mid-pollination for all of our products. You'll see it in the seed guide, in our dealer guides that we provide, our red, yellow, green charts, and you can sit with the grower and kind of walk back and understand, okay, what weather did this did this hybrid hit? How did that impact us? And kind of narrow that date down, other than saying, oh, well, I think it was around fair time, right? That's a really natural reaction. How do we kind of narrow that down? And then I also have a link for the how-to document to run and walk through Climate Field View's past weather tools. So any of you that have a Climate Field View dealer account, any of your growers that have a Field View account, any boundary that you put in a Field View account, you can go back and look at past weather for the last 10 or 15 years. You put in the planting date, you put in the wind, whatever date you're looking for, it will give you high and low temperatures. It'll show you the rainfall for that field based on radar, and then compare it to normal. So if you really want to narrow down, did this hybrid, really hit that spike in heat? We can compare that to average. We can see that on a field by field basis. We can also see variability on a field level for that rainfall. We know this year that the rainfall has been dramatic. I was with a grower on Monday who has 4.5 inches difference between some of his fields, all within the same county. So getting that kind of lined up and understanding what did this field experience is going to be really important to talk the growers through that tip that they may or may not be seeing to continue to bring confidence that yes, we're still Iowa. We're going to produce corn. We know there's yield out there, but there were some tough situations. So those are some links to walk through. And if you need some help doing that, doing those number crunching and problem solving, just give any of us a call and we're more than happy to help walk you through that. So we are getting some August rains. We had a really wonderful article in the newsletter this week about how important August rains are for soybeans. So in my western part of my territory, we are seeing some seeds within pods abort. I haven't seen full pod abortions by any means yet in my plots, but we are seeing where a 3 is maybe now a 2 because the soybeans really, really are pushing now. This is that super critical time, just as corn pollination time is in that crop. We can use as much as 2.5 inches of water a week in a soybean crop, depending on the weather, the winds and moisture and all that stuff. So making sure that we also understand the rainfall for our soybeans is going to be really important to walk our growers through yield impacts down the road. Jim, do you have any comments?
Well, it was pretty obvious on some of these soybean fields with light ground that you're going to have a hard time coming back from that. So, most areas were hot and dry enough in the early part of August, late July there that they suffered and really were starting to pull back, obviously abort flowers and really just lose their overall canopy. And once they do that, then things really start working against the ability to come back because of the sunlight penetration, and it's going to dry out that canopy even more. So some of those areas, even with August rains, it's going to be hard to save. Fields with decent ground that hung in there still, maybe flipped their leaves over, but at least didn't start to turn yellow or start to shrink back. August rains can revive them amazingly well. So we all know August is the key month for soybeans, and for some areas they've been getting what they need, but we can go here well into R5 when we're getting that full seed and still benefit from late rain. So we've got really in a lot of fields a good 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks, to help out that seed size and give us a good benefit for soybeans.
Keep doing the rain dances. That's what I'm hearing. Keep doing the rain dances. So we are seeing some western bean cutworm in the area. I found it as far north as Lake City this week, which is a little bit farther north than its normal area. So when you guys are walking fields, and in some of the products that we found it in a plot, we didn't even realize it until we had gone to fully husk back the product to showcase at a field day. So making sure you're taking time to kind of open up, look for some abnormalities in the ear there and the silks. There's not something that we're going to be able to do to control this pest at this point. It's very protected within the ear, within the husk. We're not going to come out with an insecticide, but it's important for setting expectations for the grower, for understanding what products you are going to purchase or suggest to purchase for that grower for next year. How much protection do you want to have? And then there's also the impacts that if we were to get a wet fall, right? That's always a possibility. We can see some heightened levels of ear rots and ear molds in fields that had western bean cutworm feeding. The picture on the right is a picture from Ontario from a university, but the picture on the left with that more advanced dry down ear, that's from a field of my own last year near Irwin, where we did see high levels of feeding. We ended up catching some rains and we saw some high levels of mold. So not trying to panic, but as a grower says, where do I start? Sometimes they need some help understanding what field to start on. That can be a target field, or understanding the storage implications of having a lot of that frass and broken kernels, things like that, is something that they want to have on their radar. Anything, Jim, on western bean cutworm?
Top picture would be from our sales agronomist, Adam Peterson, in Plymouth County. So Plymouth County over the years has had sporadic western bean cutworm, and showing in places again this year. tends to be a little bit heavier pressure, the potential for pressure on lighter ground, just with the way they overwinter in the soil. It's a little harder for them to actually hatch out on heavier soil types. That's why they've always been such a bigger pest in Nebraska, especially on sandier ground. But yeah, obviously the Tricepta products, anything with the Viptera trait is some of the best. I wouldn't say it's 100%. It's not quite as high of a expression as it is for controlling European corn borer. But those Tricepta products are going to be some of the better ones, and definitely a notch above VT Double Pro or any of the products containing Herculex like Smart Stacks or Smart Stacks Pro.
So making sure your grower understands that pressure, is he seeing anything, is really key for ordering time. I know that's crazy, but it's not that far down the road. So we want to make sure that those growers understand what protection they really should be having. So we'll keep moving right along here. In August, I know you guys have a lot going on. We have a lot of fertilizer sales. Kids are going back to school. Sports are starting. It can be kind of overwhelming. And sometimes we all need to take a break, right? Everyone needs a breather. And then for some people, it can be hard to start back up and you go, where do I start? I've had that conversation with a couple of our younger sellers in the last couple of weeks. So I wanted to put this at the end of the DAACAT today. I like this quote: the biggest opportunity to make the dealer feel like a trusted advisor, is right before harvest, not just be a product supplier. Right? You become a value added part of the operation. And that is, any of the successful seed dealers we have on this call can tell you that they become a trusted advisor by bringing that extra value this time of year. So just some suggestions of where to start. Turn a field observation into a harvest decision, right? Which field should we harvest first? So if you're seeing the Western bean cutworm, hey, Mr. John, we know that maybe the storage quality of high Western bean cutworm damaged fields isn't the best. You want to start here to go to town. I know you always take some grain to town first. We'll be starting to check for stalk strength, right? We'll be doing push tests. Hey, Mr. Farmer, here's what I found in your field. Provide that pre-harvest crop walk summary. We're all busy, just like we said, everything's starting back up. I know there's a lot of growers that want to get into their fields more than they are right now, as some have started to get equipment ready. So dropping off those field summaries, just a handwritten note, some field pins. You could send GPS pins with a picture to a grower, and just kind of those key observations. What do you like? What aren't you liking? How does that impact the rest of their summer? And that next step action for them. And then there's also, I'm a big fan of this. I've talked with some of you this week about this. Digital value is, I think, a big thing for growers. If you can take some time to go to one of your local combine clinics, be prepared to help a grower set a monitor, walk through that data collection. I think that's a really big differentiating factor, because our digital data is how we understand what does it mean for my acres. I did this trial, but what does it mean? And helping a grower go through that is really key. So we can bring those weather insights like we talked here, right? How's the difference? We consciously know how different our fields are, and we know there's variability, but can you help a grower bring actual concrete numbers to their harvest? So Jim, any comments here on some value added touch points?
Yeah, a few different things, and you hit on several very well, Nora. But the setting expectations, never emphasize that enough. And I will say, everyone I think on the call here knows it, but the amount of stalk breakage, green snap that's out there in certain areas is much higher than what you see from the road and what a lot of growers realize. So setting up those expectations, getting into fields, and at least getting an idea on percent is certainly going to help out. And for those of you that have a drone or have access to a drone, that's going to be one of the best tools to use, not only to find green snapper lodging, but to see the overall plant health, get an idea how much variability there is out there, and really start to see some differences between hybrids. I try to get to every plot that I have and fly with the drone just to pick out some staggering differences and maturity differences and just plain standability. So from this point on, being able to set those expectations and get an aerial view either digitally or with your drone, it goes a long ways. I mean, obviously it's showing the grower that you care about their operation, but you're really able to help them get that harvest prioritization in line and find out some issues, so there's not a surprise at harvest. That part is very key. Not only like what we were talking about with some tipping back and setting expectations, but just on the overall standability and harvest order. So this year, like we mentioned, a lower disease year, but doesn't mean there isn't disease out there. Doesn't mean there's some pockets of Goss's wilt. There's some areas that that's going to be a concern on potential standability. So making sure you're aware of that and letting your grower know. We've got to keep an eye on that here for the next month or the next 6 weeks until we do get to harvest. So very important, bring a lot of value this time of the year, help separate yourself out from other dealers.
Well, we'll round it out. We'll get you guys here out at 8:30, but Jim, you're going to have to talk about the 1.4 soybean, not something I spend a whole lot of time on.
Shocking, but it's amazing how far south this product goes. Definitely down to Highway 20, so it's coming your way. Yeah, we've been doing spotlight products on corn all season. Now we're transitioning to beans, and this is one of the key earlier products. Really has a huge following, and one of those products that very versatile as far as where it can go. For an earlier product, does have decent plant height. So sometimes that's a concern, especially as we take a 1.4 product and drag it down to Highway 20, but this one maintains that height real well, so decent stress tolerance. Overall, good defensive package, bringing in the IDC tolerance, white mold, and brown stem rot. SDS is a little bit of a watch out, rated average there at a 5, and have seen just a little bit of SDS show up this year. So something to be aware of, but overall, very versatile hybrid. I like it to plant early and harvest early and try to spread out that harvest timing, but also seems to handle some of the early cool soils very well. So one of my favorite early soybean varieties, and it's amazing how much this has grown in areas that normally you would not even consider a 1.4 soybean.
We got to get it started somewhere, and if we can keep the bean, guys, just remember when we're looking at our harvest going forward, we can make a lot of money by keeping the beans at 13%, right? That's the key. So I will scoot forward. You guys can get your CEU credits. Thanks for joining us on this rainy morning for some of us. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We're happy to have you. Give us a call if you have any questions or concerns, and we will send out this recording and the slide deck usually on Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Again, appreciate everyone for being on. That goes a long ways, and hopefully you see value in it. There's questions, comments, we can certainly stay on.
All right, seeing none. Have a great day yourself, Jim. Bye, guys.
Hey, Jim.
Yep.
Jim.
Yep.
Question for you. So on that, they said that they were finding that they could put it in a freezer and bring the rust back out and the spores would grow.
And not having it on any green tissue whatsoever, huh?
Yes. And I don't know if it's true. I guess that's why I asked the question, because I've only had one person tell me that they did and I don't remember who it was now, did some research, and they found that they took southern rust spores, put it in a freezer for 6 months, brought it back out, and they got them to grow. That's the wording that they used.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I would question whether that would relate to field situations where you're going through maybe some freeze and thaw below 32 and above, throughout the winter season. But yeah, it's, I mean, the part about being a saprophytic fungi where it has to survive on a green tissue has always been fairly clear cut, but and I suppose it proves that there's potentially a way around it, but I'd question whether that would really relate to a real world situation.
If you find the article or the study, send it to us.